Well, American Homes for Rent is a really interesting growth company in a segment of real estate that's single family rentals. My
Nice.
experience in multifamily real estate, multifamily rentals, apartment complexes, things of that nature. But the company is very young, was started around 2011 by folks from Public Storage.
Okay.
And they literally saw, as a result of the Great Recession, a large inventory of single family homes out there that were bank owned or were in portfolios and so on and so forth, and were available sometimes for pennies on the dollar.
Huh?
The model beginning was, why not pick up, instead of being a typical mom and pop landlord that has maybe 6 or 12 or 15 homes in a city, we could have 100. We could have 200 homes in a city, all throughout neighborhoods. And we get economies of scale from that, because you can then maintain them and collect rents and do lots of things on a much more economies of scale kind of thing, where you can get more automated and use technology for your processes and so on. And so that was very successful from 2011 to about 2016 or so. Then the next phase for the company, as it continued to grow, was, instead of purchasing these kind of one-offs where there's, one on this block and two on this block way over here and, scattered around the zip code, maybe we should build our own communities where we have 20 or 30 or 40 homes, just like Richmond or Toll Brothers or any of the big, home builders would build a community. But instead of then selling them off to individual owners, we'll keep them all and we'll rent them. And we'll have a rental community of single family homes. And so starting around 2016 or so, they've been doing that, and land banking and grabbing the right particular communities in all sorts of areas around the country. And so that's become a huge part of the business now. And then COVID hit. And after American Homes for Rent dipped in stock price, just like every other major company, suddenly people realized, I can't be in my 900 square foot 2-bedroom apartment anymore. I need an extra room for the kids to do school. I needed a room for a home office, because everything's happening from home now. And so suddenly there was from apartment homes into single family rentals, because people don't want to buy still at this point. Many people still want to rent. Because there's a lot of advantages in terms of, you don't have to fix anything. You just call us when something breaks.
Right.
In new home communities, not the individual homes, but in some of the community builds that we're doing, we're even taking care of the yards for renters. And so this is huge, and it's a lot easier to have a pet in a single family home than it is to have in an apartment.
Yes.
So we've actually seen.
You understand, Brian, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I am now down in Puerto Vallarta renting a home, and I have my pets right here and I'm renting.
Oh, and you wanted the home.
Yes, and we were talking, we would really like to connect with you, because we would love to do that, coordinate some kind of buying some properties and then rent them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It's really hard to be in an apartment and have pets. We have 2 dogs, 2 bigger dogs. It's really hard to do that in just an apartment situation.
Mm-hmm.
So COVID has ended up giving us an occupancy of around 98% nationwide right now. So
wow.
55,000 individual single family homes all around the country, 22 states.
So so essentially you take care of the maintenance and all of that, because that's always the hardest thing. Making sure people pay on. I had a renter in when my mom passed away in Windsor, Colorado. I had a renter that took advantage of us for eight months, and she didn't pay her rent, and she didn't, basically 14 animals. It was horrible. It was in 2016. So your company could essentially take care of those kind of issues when someone doesn't pay their rent and maintain.
We've got the computer systems and the technology behind things. Since, with 55,000 rentals, you can spread a lot of cost very easily in terms of systems and processes that we use. An example is what we use is a concept called let yourself in. For any of these homes that are available for rent, there's an electronic lockbox that you can literally walk up to that door, go to the website. The website will ask for a credit card and make sure we have a valid credit card. It essentially is acting as a deposit in case you screw up anything when you walk in the door. But at that point, if you're approved and you have a valid credit card, it will give you a code that's good for 24 hours. So you can literally walk into the empty, vacant home, tour it at your leisure, look everything up one side down the other. You don't have to worry about pressure from some salesperson who's hovering over your shoulder. Decide if that's the home that you want to have. And if so, you can initiate the rental process online, get everything ready to go. You end up with code to open up the lockbox to get hard keys once we've decided and you're ready to go on your first day, and in you go.
That's great.
Off.
So just really quick while we're chatting, I just want to acknowledge and say hello to Mohammed as he's joined on a little early with us, and we're just chatting right now. And hello, Romaine, you're on as well. So we just welcome. We're just having a brief chat as we're waiting for the top of the hour. So welcome.
So Brian, what is your role? What's your company name again?
Official title is Leadership Development Advisor. There are actually two of us that were hired into this growing company, CJ Rodriguez and me. Right now we're doing a huge amount of work on the whole leadership development, succession planning, performance management, organizational development processes within the company. Because the company is very young, it's very new. The company grew up around 7 or 8 people to start with, that were all pretty much people who knew how to buy homes, rent homes, dispose of homes, or sell them if they had reached the end of useful life as far as the company was concerned. And a single person who was acting as the legal person, and that's how the HR department eventually grew from, was this legal aspect, because that's in some companies, as you know, HR comes from legal. And now there's much more of a focus on what do we stand for? What are our values? We're now 1,400 people and could double that headcount within 5 years fairly easily as the company continues to grow like a weed. It really is a high growth company right now.
So how many employees do you have again?
1,400.
1,400. Okay, good mid-sized company.
Yeah, exactly. And could double in size very quickly. Because of things going on. I mean, I'm in a company right now, and I haven't been, to be honest, haven't been in one of these situations for a while. So it's very refreshing when I talk to senior leaders and I ask them, what are the big things that's going on the plate? And the senior leaders say, well, we got to figure out how to split from 2 divisions into 4 fairly quickly. We got to figure out how to regionalize the country and how to grow and find the positions and figure out who's going to go into the next seats. Seats are available for this kind of growth. So for the first time in quite a while, we're really having some interesting discussions about true succession planning and how to backfill and how to make sure bench strength is appropriate for a company that's continuing to grow and continuing to add people to the organization.
Well, that's fantastic, Brian. I'm so impressed at because you just started this role how recently?
September 28th. That's right. I'm in week 6.
Oh yeah.
Fire hose.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to get started right now with our forum today. So hello, thank you for joining us on our People Strategy Forum. We are so excited to have everybody today and join us. And this is our mastermind of leaders dedicated to creating workplaces where people thrive, employers reward, and customers love. So this is our thing that we do every week. Sam and I met a couple of years ago, and we started this forum back in March, and it's just been rocking and rolling, and Mountain Time, 10 a.m. So thank you all for joining us. So hello, my name is Char Miller. I am a people strategist, and I also do career coaching called HR with a Heart. I do that because I think that HR departments are transforming to really take care of their talent and their employees, and I'm here to champion that change. And also I own a company called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, where we also demonstrate and model how we take care of our employees. So I am here with Sam Reeve, and he is just a phenomenal compensation and total rewards champion, and he owns a company called CompTeam. So we thank you, Sam, and your team that's really helped us sponsor these events. And then Lisa Jackson is awesome. She is our culture strategist. And I'm telling you, there's something about talent management and there's something about culture that when they merge, it just makes magic happen in companies. So Lisa Jackson, you're awesome. Thank you for joining us. And then Sumit Singla is also joining us, and he's been in HR consulting roles. Look at his background. He's awesome. He's worked with some amazing companies such as Deloitte. So he's got some incredible insight. So this is our forum. This is our hosts for you today. Also, there's my bio. But then also today we're going to be meeting with Brian O'Neill, and he'll be he's a learning and development leader and executive, and we were just talking about his great new position and talking about his organizational development and talent management strategy background. So he'll introduce himself here shortly. So today, just want to talk about a little bit of the logistics of what's happening. I'm going to start off with what leaders can do to retain their high-performing employees. And again, as I mentioned, I have a background in HR and organizational development and talent management strategy. So I've learned and I'm applying it to a real live company. So I'm going to talk about that. Also, Brian and Lisa are going to talk about retaining hypos and hypers. I like that. And go through a discussion regarding those ideas. And then in the end, Sumit and Sam will help us lead a discussion in regards to everything in regards to talent management strategy and people strategy. So welcome everybody. Hi panelists. How are you guys doing before I get started?
Doing great. Thanks, Char. Yes, I'm glad to have everybody here. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that it's really important that we participate in the chat and just make sure you copy all attendees. Ask questions through there, and we'll be able to bring those up during the forum and so forth. So please feel free to express your thoughts.
Great. Yes. So down below, you'll see the little chat button. You'll see a Q&A. Please communicate with us. We want to hear your opinions, stories, questions. I am in kind of a remote location today, so I might be a little choppy, but it's okay. We're all right. But anyway, just communicate with us, and then also share. We are on Facebook Live. We're on LinkedIn, social media. So please share with us with your colleagues and also any of your friends, because we love to share. So I think we can go ahead and get going, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. So today I'm only going to spend about 15 minutes of our time this morning talking about what leaders can do to retain their high-performing employees. And just to give you a little bit of idea about my background, I have worked in major healthcare systems, very large. For example, Kaiser Permanente had over 159,000 employees. Banner Health, near 40,000 employees. And so I've worked in major big companies. With that, I learned a lot about talent management in the healthcare system. But what was interesting is when I started my own company in 2016, actually officially 2017, I applied my entire mindset around talent management strategy and becoming an employer of choice, as I call it. And so today I'm going to share with you what I've learned and also what has made my company super uber successful. And so as an HR department and CEO, operational leader, you might want to pay attention to the things that we're going to apply and show you how to be a great employer. So first of all, I'm going to share a concept with you called the healthy employer, because obviously with the COVID and everything else going on right now, employers really need to know how to model that for their employees to feel safe. And so the prior time we were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, employees really want to feel safe and secure in their work environment. So we're going to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about how I've transformed our talent management strategy and performance management processes to something I call retention-based assessment and interview process. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've done with my company and that are easily utilized for your company. And we have some free tools that you can use. Even today, you can download them on your phone. So I'm going to talk about that. Also, what I call the career mobility check-in discussion. Because employees, they may have another job, or they may go to another position, or something of that effect. That's going to help you with your retention strategy. So we're going to talk about that, and then we'll have some open discussion. So let's go ahead and Lisa's going to help me with some of this discussion, right, Lisa?
Absolutely. Oh, am I helping?
Oh, of course, you're there. You're beautiful. So this is my company. It's called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. This is a company I started in 2017 with my business partner. We are located in 3 different malls. One is we're based out of Colorado. One of the malls is in Denver, in Aurora Mall, the Flatirons, and Colorado Mills. And these are our locations. We have been fast and furious because we've been hiring. We're a very small company right now. We only have about 15 employees. We'll be up to 20 employees within the next month. And we're also opening in Park Meadows here in the next 30 days. So as a small business owner, I understand the challenges of hiring and recruiting and retaining and modeling how to have the very best talent coming into your organizations. I'm very happy to say that we've hired a rock star of a recruiter. His name is Monty, and he has been bringing us some gems of some talent, and he is actually been phenomenal. I can't even tell you. We've been hiring the most amazing talent, and when we get into our discussion today, I'll explain how we're coaching and developing and planning to retain that talent. So we can go to the next slide. So here it is. Here I'm going to get into what I call the healthy employer. So again, I don't mean to sound negative, but I have worked in the corporate world and corporate arena where leaders were not necessarily taking care of their employees in a very healthy way. I would say many employers, because of the corporate bureaucracy, were very political and not really taking care of their people. So I developed what I call the healthy employer a couple of years ago, where I really looked at these major topics: physical, psychological, emotional, personal, professional, and environmental factors that make a great employee environment. And I have been applying this as much as I can. Today in the political environment right now, I think our employees are feeling more unrest than ever. So today is the time to really think about these factors when you're taking care of your teams so that they feel safe and secure and happy in their work environment. So for example, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I was just going to say, add to that, Char, that we're also seeing in a lot of, I think Mercer and a lot of the big organizations are reporting increased burnout. And I think that's a big part of the work from home has a lot of advantages, but then now you're juggling family responsibilities, homeschooling children, as was pointed out earlier by Brian, people are stuffed in these little apartments. And so it is perhaps a political arena that we're seeing attention around, but also just the fact of the juggling act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention about this, I mean, this is a great, very comprehensive list. As we're thinking about employers or multinational employers that have facilities all over the world, it could be Mexico and Argentina and so forth, we have to realize that those areas have different conditions. And for instance, one thing here that's really important that is often overlooked is safe housing. And it is true. I mean, sometimes in our developed world, we're not thinking about this too much. But in some of our locations around where there might be some turmoil or things that happen, that is a critical need for some employees and should be considered. That you're having some sort of relief there if it's necessary. So a lot of different things here. Thanks, Char.
Yeah, I know it's kind of a lengthy list here, but it is everything that I think about. For example, simple things like hydration, having the water machines in your location, clean, healthy water, assuring that your medical coverage is affordable. So, for example, my company now has free and healthcare for all my employees, and there is actually companies that offer not very expensive healthcare. So you just need to research. And then also just thinking about when you're having staff meetings, yes, we don't just bring breakfast burritos, we bring fruits and vegetables, you know, but everything psychological, just the conversations of having with your employees and as far as they're psychologically doing, as far as their mental health, because Lisa and I were just talking this morning, people are very fearful right now during this time. Tuning in and having those resources, emotional, you know, it's okay. You don't have to get into someone's personal situation too much, but you certainly want to tune in and talk to your employees about how they're doing during this time. Also, reaching out to your employees on the family level, for example, personal. When there was a lockdown in Colorado, talking about how are you doing during this time? How's your family doing? You know, what's your vision, you know, and without crossing too many of the boundaries as far as getting too personal with your employees, but you certainly want to have a conversation about it. And then also professional, you know, talking about, you know, are you planning to stay with this organization long-term, or can I assist you with your long-term professional goals? How can my company, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, how can my company help you grow your skill sets, your competencies, capabilities, so that you can achieve your long-term professional goals? And then obviously environmental. So for example, in my organization, assuring that we have all the personal protective equipment, the sanitary, non-toxic sanitary protocols in my company, and assuring that we have a safety officer in my organization. I think all organizations need to think about that. So we could have a whole presentation on this particular slide, but I just want to give you a high-level overview. So Lisa, what is your thoughts about the healthy employer?
Well, I love that. I screenshotted that. Just I want to study it a little bit more later because I've never seen that. We've been talking about that quite a bit in the realm of culture, but I think it is. I've been listening to a book, and this seems off topic, but I was very reminded of it as I was listening to you, called Anti-Cancer Living. And it's a book about the fact that cancer has become this epidemic around health in our system. And you could substitute a lot of words for cancer. Mental health, physical health are really challenged in our society right now. And so to me, it's a very powerful intention and a really important one, because the people that you count on to innovate and deliver your results need to be able to be healthy at work. It just seems so simple, but it's not so much easy.
Yeah, so absolutely. I worked in healthcare systems for a long time, okay? I'm not here to bash healthcare systems, but I'm telling you that our healthcare system is sick. So not only is our healthcare system sick, sometimes our bureaucracy and our organizations are not well either.
Right.
So I just put this list together to say we need to model not only how to be a healthy organization, and that's why my company is called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, but we also need to model how we're a healthy employer to take care of our employees' well-being overall. And so you're right, Lisa, it's like we talk about it like it's common sense, but maybe it's like something we need to really remind ourselves of today, because a lot of these companies have wellness departments, but they're not really integrating wellness into talent management and culture strategy.
Yeah.
So that is the challenge. When I was working at Kaiser Permanente, I spent a lot of time with the wellness director as the talent management director, and we were trying to figure out how to integrate these two processes. But today, more than ever, is so important. So thank you. So we can go to the next slide. So number 2 is I have integrated what I call TMA and retention-based assessment into my organization. So this is an assessment dialogue with my employees relative to how do you build a relationship with your new employees and your current employees. So at my company, we have established the TMA assessment, which, by the way, since you're participating today, you can get this for free and you can try this out. But this has been an amazing discussion with my employees about their personalities and their needs and interests and what it's going to take to retain our employees based upon their needs, their goals, their aspirations. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about what this is about, please let us know. Any one of us can do that. And we've been utilizing that from the very beginning. So what do you think about that, Lisa? You've tried it out.
This you and I, as you know, went through this journey together to really understand talent management through a whole lens of from seeing it as and Brian's going to talk about this later, as an opportunity for how you grow and develop your business. It's not just a talent process that you hand off to HR necessarily, but that it is really a core strategy of your business. And I love how TMA really takes the mystery out of that. So I'm glad that you're speaking to that around people will stay in places where they feel at home, right? And we're talking in the chat a little bit about how millennials, I ran across this study yesterday when I was researching for my newsletter, that 56% of millennials, and I think this is a very interesting statistic that I did cite the source on, would or should, an employee should stay at the same company for more than 20 years. You know, and so there's a desire, I think, that's growing on the part of the largest generation in the workforce, our millennials. They're approaching late 30s and 40s. Right? I think the youngest or oldest is 40 this year, and they want to stay, you know, with organizations, but it's that mix between, you know, the employers just lay off at the first sign of trouble, right? So RIFs are still very, very common, which is very damaging to a retention strategy. And then also, are you cutting your training and development program at the exact time that you need to retain people? So I think when you take an approach like the TMA, you can then get that glove fit with people, but you still have to do a few things to make them want to stay.
Awesome. Yeah, and Sam, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to tell you how I've operationalized this in my personal organization. In fact, this is for free, folks. If you're on here and you're watching, go to TMA
Cool.
Career Coach.
Yeah, it's a really
cool app that you can download on your phone. It is a free app on your phone, okay? And let me tell you what we've done. So when I talk about building that relationship conversation, I actually can do interview questions that is in alignment to my competencies of the company, Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. The interview questions are right there at your fingertips. I can literally pull that up on my phone. So if you want to download that, also just want to give you a couple of scenarios that we've applied this. Now, today our conversation is about retention-based interview. It's about the relationship-based interview. Oftentimes employees don't want to tell you exactly what their real goals are in their life,
right.
Their real passions are in their life. So my company, when we do our interview questions relative to our competencies, which this free app will give you, the TMA Career Coach app, I learn, and my leaders learn, my director and my managers learn what the career aspirations of the employees are. So for example, I'll give you one. One of my employees wants to be a pharmacy technician. I don't know why, but she likes that. Another one of my employees wants to be an anesthesiologist, if I could say that right. So when we actually can pull up career advice relative to their long-term career goals and talk about their development and their career aspirations and how Rocky Mountain Health Advocates can align to their long-term development and career goals. It actually gives recommendations on development, learning, competencies, and skills within the TMA Career Coach app. And it's completely free. It's funny because I have seen a couple negative comments about the free app, but the funny thing is that there is career coaching advice in the app and it's free. Obviously, if you want someone like us to help you with that and apply it operationally to your company, you might need some more support from one of myself or my team. But I personally applied this free application to my leadership and my employees, and they have just in time, they can pull it up right on their phone, do an interview, do a development dialogue, do a coaching dialogue, and apply it to an employee's actual career ambitions long-term. Now, my organization is very fortunate because we pay very well for our employees to work part-time. Our employees only work about 25 hours a week. So our employees can literally do their ambitions outside of their job with us. And for example, we have an employee that wants to be is a drummer. He's a professional musician. We have another employee that is actually a motivational speaker, and he supports people going through rehab. So we apply coaching and developing our employees with this app so that they can do the things they want to do outside of work. Have you tried this app, Lisa?
I have, and I don't interview people, I don't hire people, but I have definitely gone in there and taken a look at it and given a few debriefs, through the forum, the people that have taken the survey with those questions in mind. It's really cool. Yeah, and you don't really need, you can use it without even necessarily having a TMA result on the person. They're just good questions. So better to have one, but yeah.
Well, I just have been enjoying applying it with an actual real life situation. So it's been great. So we can go to the next slide. So here is where the lovely magic of Sam and the comp team has blessed my company, because this is kind of a complicated matrix here. But also it's about compensation and total rewards, and assuring that your employees understand where their career mobility will occur within the organization. And so I have actually had some employees that maybe have not been well placed, but luckily with this type of structure, we've been able to relocate their career within the organization before we lose them. So Sam, can you talk about what this matrix is all about?
Yeah, so this matrix here is often used for larger companies. So this is not the one that, of course, we used at the with Char's situation. But what we're trying to do here is have a visual representation of how employees can grow their career through the company. And so Lisa was talking about millennials wanting, or they would like to be at a company for longer. And a lot of times why employees leave is because they don't know, or they think the next best step for themselves, their career, their family is externally. And so if you're talking to your employees about their career ambitions and you're showing them what the potential career opportunities are in your company, you may not have growth up, but you can increase their scope and look at other types of cross training that can keep them engaged and allow them to continue to build their skill set. And so having a structure like this is a first step to allow that. This is a visual representation of that.
Absolutely. So my organization, I've hired in, I would call it a sales rep kind of position, and it's actually a health advocate position. We have had some of our employees, very talented, that have struggled with being a quote sales rep. We have been able, with this type of career matrix, to evaluate if they're in a better position, for example, an administrative or a compliance role. Also, we've had some sales reps that have been doing a phenomenal job, but haven't been the best fit for the management position. So looking at those individuals and helping them expand their role in marketing or in recruiting, just really helping our employees using the apps that I talked about before, the TMA process. We're applying it so we can expand their roles, align to their career goals and ambition, and be able to utilize their skill sets for our company. So lots of examples there. But anyway, just want to ask you to take advantage of this PMA complimentary assessment with us. If you are interested in trying this out and talking with myself or Sam or Lisa or Sumit, email us, sam@comteam.net, and we'll be happy to go through and share our learnings and how this can help your company. And that's mainly what I wanted to share today.
So I think Dave brought up a really good question here. I want to bring it to the audience here.
Okay.
So basically, when we think about the startup culture that is pervasive around a lot of small companies now, that basically that somebody comes with an idea, they build this, they get funding, they go through Series A, B, and so forth, and then they have an objective to sell or have something in the near term. And I've spoken to a lot of people in the startup area. A lot of them are clients of mine, and I understand that they're trying to get that idea and getting it launched and selling the business. But a lot of times that short-term mindset of, when they're thinking about themselves, hey, I want to start the business, I want to create something of value, I want to sell, and then move on. Sometimes that founder mindset can limit the employee experience in getting people through that. And Sumit, I imagine you have a lot to say about this as well. Oh, you're on mute there, Sumit.
Without taking too much time, yes, Sam. So in fact, in the Indian context, I see a lot of organizations are investing in initiatives on inclusion, on how to give people the right kind of careers and to make them stay longer. Also, because we're a developing economy, it's relatively easy for people to jump to a different organization. And typically the best and the fastest way to grow your compensation is that. So it's very common that when you change jobs, you get a 30-35% salary hike. So very often career development gets masked as compensation, and in the exit interview people say or HR writes that the person left for compensation reasons, but that's not why a person started looking out in the first place. And a lot of startups are now wisening up to this fact, and they're actually trying to build workplaces that matter and cater to the needs of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. I mean, if you have the mindset that, of course, I mean, you can still have the mindset that I want to create something of value and leave the business and transfer this on to the next person who can take it to the next level. There's nothing unhealthy about that, but ensuring that you're creating a culture and taking care of your people so that they have the long-term mindset, because a lot of those individuals are part of that company. They create the value, and the next buyer is going to be very interested in ensuring that those people can sustain the path that you're creating at that startup. So it's important to think about your people. Absolutely.
In fact, what you're saying resonates with a book that we discuss often, The Infinite Game, by Simon Sinek, where the whole emphasis is on playing the infinite game and not really thinking of short-term wins and just trying to figure out who's the highest bidder, selling the company and getting out of there.
That's right.
Excellent.
Hey, Brian, so I'm glad you're on.
This has been a great discussion, guys.
Go ahead, Char.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was about to introduce Brian O'Neill. So, hey, Brian.
Hi there.
You're with American Homes, and you're a talent development advisor, and this fits nicely into our retention dialogue. So welcome today.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pop up my screen right now so that I can kind of run this little presentation myself. Appreciate the chance and the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit. For me,
sure.
This is kind of a combination of things that I've been doing over my entire career, but also things that I'm now doing in the first 6 weeks of being in a brand new position that has never been, this position has never existed before within American Homes for Rent, in a company that's still very, very young. American Homes for Rent is only about 9 years old, depending on exactly how you count. As a publicly traded company, they're only about 7 years old. And American Homes for Rent is pretty much what they do. Our company is 55,000 single-family rental homes around the United States in 22 different states, large numbers of city markets in those states. And we're seeing our business grow like a weed for lots of reasons. Before COVID, some of the reasons involved the idea that America is becoming a more mobile culture, where people are not so much interested in owning homes as much as they are in renting homes these days because of the mobility of the workforce. And post-COVID, as we get into the COVID era, we suddenly found a huge demand on people's parts moving away from the small shoeboxy style apartments that they may have been in, trying to find the extra room for a home office, the extra room for their kids to do schoolwork online, virtually, a yard for the dog and or for the 2 dogs or whatever it might be. And so our occupancy rates are extremely high right now. They're on average 98% around the entire country. So in many of our markets, we literally don't have inventory at the moment to be able to rent to folks. It's a really interesting phenomenon that COVID has helped spur on, but long term, it looks like it's a really interesting model. So when I came in just 6 weeks ago, and I'm one of 2 talent development advisors or leadership development advisors for the company, one of the first things we were asked to do was what we're working on, believe it or not, 9-box, which I'll get into here in a moment because I have mixed emotions about the 9-box. But essentially, we are growing so fast that we believe that we're going to have a crisis in terms of our succession planning and our talent development. What can we do to ensure that we've got the pipeline set up and that our senior leaders are correctly evaluating who our high potentials and high performers are, which is hypos and hypers. That's a shorthand that McKinsey actually created when they originally created the 9-box back in the late 80s or early 90s. So some of the slides I'm going to show you are essentially what we've also been showing a lot of our senior leaders and regional leaders within our organization to make the case for why we should be doing some of the initiatives that we're doing. First of all, we like to show them the idea that all of this is kind of interconnected. That if you're going to believe in the concepts of developing your employees, then you've got to focus not just on one thing, you've got to focus on what are we doing to attract the right talent. So that's our recruiting and acquisition group. What are we doing to engage them? So there's our standard training and development group and our employee engagement strategies, and how do we reassure folks that this is the right choice for them? How do we make sure that they feel that their opinions are being heard? A lot of D&I, diversity and inclusion pieces that we're working into this to make sure that people are feeling engaged and a part of the overall sense of where the company wants to go. Developing folks, which is obviously this idea of how do we continue to leverage knowledge, skills, mindsets, so they feel that they are continuing to grow within the organization and therefore lessen the chance that they'll be, kind of swayed by the siren song of another company out there with grass is always greener kind of mentality. And that helps us all. If we attract and engage and develop, we retain better, we reduce overall turnover, we have less cost of trying to fill or backfill positions where people might have left us. And that ultimately creates a better profit structure for the company. It actually helps. There is a return on investment if you develop employees, because that helps with the retention and therefore reduces your cost, which increases your overall profit. There's some statistics that we normally show our folks as we're going through this right now. which we think is pretty interesting, Gallup organization, has been doing meta-analyses of the relationship between team engagement and performance for about 20 years now. The most recent study that they did in 2019 involved 82,000 teams, 230 organizations, almost 2 million individual employees, almost 50 different industries, 73 different countries globally around the world. And their work has been validated by other polls that LinkedIn has done and Huffington Post has done. They all tend to agree that, first of all, globally, about 3 out of 4 employees out there will state that they feel they're not reaching their overall potential in the workplace. That's 3 of 4, 74%. So that's an amazing number. 68% of these surveyed employees in the last survey said that their most important factor for them in terms of staying with an organization was learning and development. Their own self-development. It beat out salary and benefits. So the idea that people want to grow and want to develop, and that's really driving decisions for them on whether or not, if those opportunities are there, they'll stay. If the opportunities are not there, they will not stay. That was validated by another statistic that showed that 40% of employees leave an organization within their first year if they perceive that there is not a solid development program for them within the organization. So that's the reason they're claiming. So that's 4 out of 10 folks leaving within a year. And obviously that's costly. That has a huge negative ROI for a company, because the average turnover cost, generally an average, I'm sure some people will say, oh boy, it's a lot more in our particular industry. But average over all these organizations is at least 3 times the cost of hire.
Yeah.
So if you're spending $50,000 to hire someone, when you think about all the recruiting and acquisition costs and the time costs and all the other sunk costs that you may have in recruiting someone, and then they leave within a year, you're suddenly going to have to then spend $150,000 to find the next person who comes in the door to replace that person.
So Brian, can I just ask a question about this slide? Which is this, I just want to come back to the not reaching potential. That was, I want to make sure I understood that properly. So that's saying what, 74% of people would stay in a role even if they're not reaching potential. Can you shed a little more light on that? Yeah.
It's 74% of all the employees that Gallup surveyed around the world said that in their current position, they don't feel that they're reaching their potential.
I got it. Okay, I misunderstood that statistic. Yeah.
So 3 out of 4 folks are claiming that they're, essentially 3 out of 4 employees are saying they're unfulfilled in their current position.
Right. And what's most important to them is the opportunity to develop and learn and
68% development is actually the number one thing that they're looking for in an organization. It's beating out salary and benefits. And we've known that. I mean, if you also look at it from in terms of an engagement piece, because Gallup, of course, is really big on the whole idea of employee engagement. The idea is how did someone become engaged? Well, one of the key ways that an employee becomes engaged in an organization is when they feel the organization believes in them and wants to help them grow, wants to help them learn new things, wants to help them get ready for an next position, wants to help them prosper within the organization. So really interesting statistics. And we've been talking with our senior and regional leaders about these to key in on kind of the power stat. It's the last one, that has to do with this particular slide. And that is that when companies do have perceived strong development for their employees in the organization, those companies that are identified that way on average have a 24% higher profit margin than companies who are perceived as not having good, strong development.
Does not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
You know, because that tenure produces more solid. I think my experience with that is that tenure produces more aligned teamwork within the organization, which is then, you know, a lot easier to take some risks around innovation or to have open conversations about what we need to do or change to be better.
Absolutely. Well, and quite frankly, it also creates much lower turnover cost and high retention. And just from a pure sense of the money involved in turning people and hiring for new positions, just think to yourself, if you've ever been in a situation where you've spent the last 2 years and your team has never been fully formed because your team is constantly having people leave. And you're constantly having to interview and deal with bringing on another person to come on board. Think of the amount of time, resources, energy, engagement that has been lost as a part of that. And so if we can find ways to develop our people, to identify who the true high performers are, and make sure we have a good strategy around the hypers in terms of their overall development, which is different than the development of what I call solid performers, the folks in the organization who are kind of the steady eddies. As long as we can identify that and then begin to implement it in place, we have this shot of achieving much higher profit margins over time. And so that's the message we've been giving to our senior leaders as we're pitching them what we're doing in terms of overall development strategy. We usually end with this slide that says, you know, we can't think of the development of our employees as just another thing to add on or do as a part of, we got to do our regular business, but we also then have to do this development piece. What we're attempting to instill into our senior leaders is, no, this is integrated because you yourselves developed our core competencies and our competencies for supervisors, for department heads, and for executives. These are the current core competencies that are brand new in our organization. And when we go back and talk about customer focus, that includes internal customer focus, that includes focus on our internal employees.
Good. I was going to ask that. Who's the customer? If you're a management, your customer is your talent.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to include internal customers in your focus, not just external customers. So it's your fellow employees, it's your team, it's the people you report to, the people who report to you. They're all your customers. Got to focus on that, got to communicate better. You have to be adaptable for different situations. You have to value differences. All of that leads to driving results, but developing our talent, this is one of the interesting things about our list right now. It's called out more specifically for department heads and officers. But CJ and I, as we're coming into week 6, we're already on a little crusade to say, we're not sure that should be just listed there just for department heads and officers. To us, developing talent is much more of a core overall competency. So we're finessing that language and seeing what we can do as we're newbies coming into the situation that we see developing. But we're talking about the employee development is an integral part of what we do. It just has to be a part of the job. It's the essence of everyone's job. Everybody's job all over the planet, no matter what you do, is your job. There's the job description or the functions of the job, but then there's the essence of the job, which always boils down to 2 things and 2 things only: communicating well, building relationships. If you do those 2 things well, your job is 90% complete. The essence of your job is being fulfilled, and developing folks is a part of that essence of the job. So how do we do that? And what do we do specifically?
Well, I was going to ask you, actually, I'm just curious about, do you have executive leadership team buy-in to this?
Yes, this was actually, what's nice about it is from Dave Singleton, who's the CEO of the company, on down. In the last 6 weeks, I've had more conversations with the CEO of this company than I had in my previous companies with my CEO, and I was there for 3.5 years. So it's fascinating when you have people who are willing to have the conversation and willing to say, we actually, Brian, you know, as Dave has told me, he says, we actually created this. This started before you got on board. We realized that as a company, we had been working for the last 7-8 years just on growing the company just on, the functions. Buy houses, rent houses.
Yeah.
House needs a new roof or is beyond its useful life, sell the house, dispose of it, get more. How do we continue to work this? How do we make sure our processes are there? IT and technology processes to make sure that things are right. And it's just in the last year, some of this was my boss, Lisa Phelps, coming on board about a year ago, and really beginning to flesh out the HR part of the business, saying that we've really got to think about now more the longer term, or as Summit mentioned earlier, Infinite Game, Simon Sinek's book. How, what's the legacy for this company? We can't just thinking about next quarter, next year. We got to think now about a 20-year plan for what we're thinking about for this business.
That's awesome. There's a really interesting dialogue, and you might be getting to this, Brian. So I'm going to just pop this in, from the chat. That's what's happening on the chat, because if you're coming to it, it would be interesting to answer it in the context of when you get to it. But it's really this whole narrative around when are people ready for promotion? And there's a little bit of the 9-box potential versus performance thing, kind of coming up in the chat. But it's this idea of, sometimes you've got a person in a role for 7 years who's a really solid performer, but they're not promoting that person. Why? Versus the person who's there for a year or two. And I think that it's an interesting dialogue that's happening, that sometimes people just, need to be, it's that whole argument about need to be on different career paths, that they may not want to be promoted, they're not in the position, or they don't feel confident, or their life situation doesn't support it. And so really kind of getting, I assume as we go through this, you're going to get into a little bit deeper, how you make these distinctions that are much finer, I think, distinctions than what a 9-box can do, right?
Well, and it's because, you have to treat everybody as an individual human being. So this gets back into concepts. And we're an organic, work with people is an organic process. It's neither software nor hardware. It's wetware. Because
it's wetware.
I always say that it's one of my things when I'm talking about people, that think.
Does that mean slippery?
Human, neither hardware nor software. We are wetware. We are organic people. Our brains operate organically, and so. You can't hurt the feelings of a piece of software. You can't hurt the feelings of a computer printer. You can kick it around all day if you want to, and it's not going to hurt the printer's feelings. But people, we operate off of emotion, and all the logic in the world sometimes will not fix if you're not thinking about how the other person is feeling and how they're perceiving things. So as I walked in the door 6 weeks ago, it was, congratulations, Brian. We're really glad to have you here. We've done a 9-box. And from my point of view, it was like, oh, horrors, because in my career, I've had enough experience with the 9-box to know that it can be corrupted so quickly and so easily by people who don't understand what kind of tool the 9-box really is. And so luckily in the last 6 weeks, CJ and I have actually introduced what we're calling to them a slightly different take on the 9-box, still within the parameters of what we were presented with. In other words, there were certain rules or things that we were unable to change or mess with. Number one, that we were going to have a 9-box, and all the senior folks, all the way down to mid-level leadership, were going to be 9-boxed in the organization.
Were they open to changing the axes labels?
They were not. And the axes are going to be the McKinsey standard performance and potential, which is potential is so subjective, it's very hard to deal with.
Right.
And thirdly, we're going to number the boxes, and we're going to start with number 1 in the top right corner. We're going to number all the way through. Other versions of the McKinsey 9-box have box 1 in the lower corner for the lowest performer, lowest potential employees. But for us, it's going to be box 9. And I did my best on that one to say, do we really need the numbers? And the answer came back from everybody, yes, we can't keep track of anything unless we know what number. It's much easier for us to say they're box 5 or they're box 7 versus they're a solid contributor or they're an inconsistent performer, which is too bad because hopefully within a year or two, I can get them out of that. But for now, what I'm going to show you now is the 9-box that exists at our organization with some wonderful tweaks from CJ and I as we got through this and made sure that everybody was okay. One of the cool things about the senior leadership at my organization right now is, to some extent, we're giving people dying of thirst in the desert some water. They have not had some of this before, so they're very grateful and very appreciative of what we're beginning to show them. Those of you who are familiar with standard McKinsey 9-box, it's the same layout. On the x-axis is performance, on the y-axis is potential. Performance, as we know, is much more objective. We have performance data that can let people know whether they're inconsistently meeting expectations or consistently meeting and sometimes exceeding, or actually exceeding most of the time expectations. So we always start with that first to try to work with people to say, okay, which column will this person go into first? Then we talk potential. And what we've done is we've worded, you'll see on many of the bullet points that are listed here, we have worded potential into a combination of the individual's potential and the company's potential to have a next seat available, which helps to validate the boxes. The classic error that a lot of senior leaders make around 9-box is that 9-box is some kind of performance evaluation. It's not. There is a performance component on it, but really it's a tool for development. It's a tool that's meant to say, how do we develop people who are in different stages in their career? The development strategy for boxes 1, 2, and 3, which you'll notice here, we actually have color keyed into a little darker blue. The original version of this 9-box had all those boxes shaded green, had other boxes shaded yellow, and had the lower boxes shaded red. Classic error in terms of ascribing color schemes to what is actually just a different approach, depending on where you land in the 9-box. So we were able to finesse that a little bit. The darkest blue, these are all our colors, our blue colors. The darkest blue is a grouping, boxes 1, 2, and 3, that we know of as the high potentials, high performers. The next lightest shade, boxes 5, 8, and 6, are what we call our solid performers or our solid contributors. And the next lightest shade is boxes 4 and 7, which we tend to call the performance development group. These are the folks for whom the primary development for them is performance, moving performance up to a standard. And we have introduced the concept to everyone that if anybody tries to put someone in box 9, the very first thing we're going to ask them is, where have you been with these people the last 6 or 12 months? How in God's name did they come to very low potential and very low performance just now, that you're just now deciding that they're a box 9? They should have been in some other box to begin with, and they've either shown themselves, or it's our fault that performance has gone down, or we have decided their potential is lower. So what's the deal there? What's the story? And so I tend to joke with everybody that, first of all, most likely this is an 8-box exercise in most cases. We're not using it the way that GE and Jack Welch used it in the 90s, where Jack Welch would say there's 10% of people in box 9 every single year, and we're going to get rid of the people in box 9 every single year. And of course, that created all sorts of ridiculousness. We have told our senior leaders that in no way is this a linear ranking exercise, that box 5 is not necessarily better than box 6. And we know that.
But is it, because Dave Needham is asking in the chat on this point exactly, Brian, what's the meaning of the numbers? Is it the order? Is it the strength of where you invest? So you invest first in the 1s and then a little bit less in the 2s and 3s? What is the numbering?
Yeah, you invest differently depending on the groupings in which these fall. And the only reason the numbers are here is because that's what we walked into. Lisa, my boss, and senior leaders had already bought into the idea that, okay, top right is box 1 And then 2, 3 would be next if you're just kind of going in an order that's kind of diagonal going across the boxes. So you got 4, 5, 6 going diagonal across the middle, then
We
7.
read left to right, so it's just sort of random like that.
Yeah, and other versions, the McKinsey versions, as I recall, started 1 in the bottom and went up and over, if I remember correctly.
That's the one I've always seen. So yeah.
Boxes, you know, that's the problem. That's one of the reasons I'm not a fan of 9 boxes, because there's
So I'll just say, working with big systems, it was a problem. It was a serious problem.
Yeah.
And I'm a big advocate with being very transparent and honest and forthright with your employees and your talent, and to be able and to show them that they're in the bottom left corner if as a low performer. It's very disengaging. And my opinion is that oftentimes your highly engaged employee that becomes disengaged and burnt out sometimes will go from the top right down to the bottom left on the 9 box. And I think your model here is going to be far more inspiring and engaging for an employee to really talk about how they can be a key contributor or how they can improve.
That's correct. And of course, for us, the primary thing is, number one, we've been highly recommending and getting more forceful on this to our senior leadership that you not disclose to anyone their box number. Instead, you have a one-on-one conversation with them and say, hey, just wanted to thank you for all of your efforts. I think you're a solid contributor, or I think steady performer.
You wouldn't show them this particular grid in this box and say, you're here.
Again, that's yet another corruption of 9 boxes that many seniors think, oh, I'll just copy this off and I'll shove it at the person that I've 9 boxed and say, this is where I placed you. You know, what do you think? And that's horrible because, again, employees will always think of the numbering system as if it was linear. So I always, you mean I'm a box 8? That's only 1 away from the lowest box. Oh my God. I'm a worthless employee.
Yeah.
And really the box 8 here,
So you're trying to lead with compassion, dignity, and respect, which is my company's motto. And you're sitting here saying, I'm going to stick you in this box. Your name is in this box. And you're right. You're absolutely right. I've actually sat in the boardroom of 14 executives sticking names in boxes, and then no discrepancy about sharing that information. They take it out to their favorite superstar. They share that information. That information is spread, and it's toxic. It's absolutely destructive.
I agree.
So if it's not managed well, it could be a real problem to your culture.
Yeah, that's why CJ are well, I'll tell you a little bit more here in a minute, but
yeah, I think it would be great to let you kind of go through and come back to that, circle back to that point around you were handed this. What's your kind of way you're going to mitigate it? Because clearly you're thinking about that, right?
We were handed a very bad version of this. You should have seen some of the bullet points that were in some of these boxes before. Able to intercept and do some wordsmithing around some of this stuff. My vision is within a year or two, we can remove the box numbers. There's no real need to have these numbers up because they all have a decent label.
That's what I was just wondering. Can you just get rid of the numbers? Yeah, as a starting point.
Would love to. Right? There's a lot of preaching to the choir in this segment. So believe me.
You should see what's happening in the chat. Anyway, that's okay. I'm giving you a heads up. Don't worry. There's a very robust conversation parallel to this happening around the dangers of 9 boxes.
And I hope they all agree that I'm with them on that. I first said, we don't need to be doing 9 boxes. It's kind of a 30-year-old hoary kind of way to look at things. But given the context, what we've done is we've changed it into more of a development tool. So let me see here if I can get to the next one. Yeah. So as you see, we've grouped. We've now, what we talk much more about as we're speaking with our senior leaders is the groupings. And the purpose of this particular presentation was, what do we do for high performers and high potentials? So our high performers or high potentials or our strong contributors are in these 3 boxes. They either they're either consistently meeting performance or exceeding performance all the time. And we've identified that they have at least mid potential, possibly high potential. And so this is boxes 1, 2, and 3. And the one, of course, at the very tippity top, box 1, ready future leader, is someone who has been, identified by their supervisor or manager is always exceeding performance and having quite high potential. So the conversations around here are, in general, for this entire group, we have a development path now that we're getting into much more detail with our toolkits to help our leaders understand, how do you develop these folks? What is the main strategy for development? And the number one thing is, you're prepping for the seat. We're in a company that's growing like a weed and actually has next potential positions. In some cases, already noted on future style org charts for the coming year. It's kind of fun to be in a situation where I've got senior leaders telling me, Brian, we need this stuff because we're going to go from 2 divisions to 4 divisions within a year, and we've got to find 2 additional people who can do the same job that these other 2 people are doing. And so can we identify them? Are they in the organization right now? And what do we need to do to get them ready so that when that seat becomes available, they can just slide right in? So prepping for the seat, job shadowing, extremely important. A mentorship program with a very strong mentor-mentee relationship, including these folks in high-level meetings, making sure they're invited, making sure they truly are getting the sense of what's being talked about in a more strategic sense than maybe the more tactical sense that they're used to in their current job. As much as possible, delegation of duties to them, the concept that someone needs to do the job first before they're ready for the job. That as much as possible, if you can delegate key duties to them so that they get that experience before they jump in the seat, then they'll be in better stead later. Access to executives, extremely important. Making sure that these folks have either standard meetings set up or are a part of group meetings or have easy ways to get one-on-one time with the executives to understand what the strategic aspects of the growth are. And then, of course, from a pure development, leadership development side, the more strategic leadership development aspects, how we lead the business, what the business strategy is all about. How do we state that vision and mission and values to others? And how do we constantly communicate that? How do we make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction? What's interesting is, and I didn't have it on this presentation for time purposes, but we have a whole general development path for folks who are the steady eddies, the folks who are considered to be the solid performers. Again, we're fighting and making sure that senior leaders know those folks are the overwhelming majority of the workers in the organization. You are only going to have about 10 or 15% at the very most of your people show placement in boxes 1, 2, and 3. The vast majority will be in boxes 5, 6, and 8, and a few will be in boxes 4 and 7, usually for reasons of our fault, not their fault. So we're getting a lot of great education around how to use this in a way that steers them towards, okay, if they're placed in a box, then how do I develop them? That's the main objective. It's not, okay, I placed them in a box, they're the golden child, or I placed them in a box, they're mediocre. That in no way describes the purpose that we want to use 9box for. It's a tool to help you with development. That's the most important thing that we want to tell them. So for high potentials and high performers, first, how are we identifying them? And this to me describes it more than anything else. We have to talk. CJ and I have been setting up a series of one-on-one hour to hour and a half long talks with every senior leader in the organization, every VP, every EVP, every SVP, and Dave, to go through and say, okay, for the people who directly report to you, we're going to walk through the 9box with you and answer your questions and help guide you to what you think is the right placement of this person in the 9box. To immediately then say, okay, once you're placed, now the focus is, how do you want to develop this person? And we're
For what? For what kind of path or role?
Yeah, exactly, for that particular position. And what specifically are you thinking of, and how can we help you to make sure that this person is on the right development path so that when the seat opens, and we're constantly, we're emphasizing to them, you should only put someone in that first box if they have high performance, high potential, and the company has high potential for a seat to be open. If the company doesn't have that much high potential, then they're probably in a mid potential role, which is that box 3.
Not because of their capability or performance, but because that's what the path
Absolutely
would look like here.
We're also constantly reiterating
Kind of
that
cool.
high potential does not necessarily mean high talent.
Right.
High potential means they may not know the stuff yet. And so your job is to figure out how to get them to know that stuff so they can get into the right
That's
seat.
cool.
So the main thing about this is it's one-on-ones.
I like that you're developing this
at a time.
conversationally. Yeah.
Yeah. One senior leader at a time. We are educating them on what the 9-box is and what it is not. What it can be used for, which is primarily a development tool, and what you should not be doing, which is saying, okay, I'm posting all the 9-box results on the wall. Here's my team. None of that. These continue to have to be one-on-one conversations where you, in our opinion, should never mention the box number to them at all, but instead say, hey, we're working through development. I've identified you as a driven contributor or as a ready future leader, and here's our plan. We got to get this, working together so that you're getting ready for that next seat. So that's how we're identifying them first. This is an exercise where I think, the mistake that a lot of companies make is they think they can do this by just throwing somebody a job aid and telling somebody you got a week to set all your people in 9-box. And instead, we're doing this individually, one at a time, moving slowly through the organization as we go down. And we're stopping. The other thing is we are stopping the 9-box at the director level. Directors will get this exercise from their bosses, but directors will not use a 9-box to actually figure out the development strategy for their people. Instead, that's the second part of this, to the right half of the diagram. We're developing 2 separate toolkits for how we keep our high potentials and high performers, and of course the solid performers in our organization, using development strategy. The 9-box matrix and toolkit is only going to senior leaders. They're the only ones who'll see that. It's an interactive PDF. It has several tabs in it. It literally goes from box 9 down to box 1, a separate tab that shows what questions should you be asking, what action steps should you be taking, what specific development belongs for people who are placed in this box, what are your considerations, what are the dangers, danger signals to watch out for, so on and so forth. But the other one, the red bannered one, the development toolkit, and that's all it's going to be called, is development toolkit, only has 3 tabs in it. It has a tab for high potentials, high performers. It has a tab for solid performers, and it has a tab for performance development. And we take them through an exercise that could be used in a 9-box environment, but doesn't have to be. Instead, we walk them through, how are you assessing this person's performance? And then later, how are you assessing this person's potential? And then based on that, go to this grid to decide, are they a high potential? Are they a solid performer? Or is it a performance development issue? And work it from there. So the company has agreed with us that, 9-box is so prone to misinterpretation and people going nuts over numbers and things like this, that we are only going to give this the actual 9-box to our senior folks in the organization, and mid-level, entry-level folks in the organization are going to see their development strategy through a different lens, a more of a grouping lens, where the development is essentially the same for 3 boxes, and 2 boxes. We're also telling everybody that if you identify somebody as very low performance and very low potential, the first thing we're going to ask you is, how did they get there?
Yeah.
Because that's error number 462 of classic 9-box, is that too many companies use it as, oh, this way we'll know who we get rid of this year.
Exactly. It's a bottom 10% just get chopped off at the end of the year, right?
And to be honest, you can do that once, but if you may have a few people once who are at the ninth box who are at the low end of the scale. But if you have the next year other people who end up in that box, shame on you as a company. You didn't recruit and hire properly. You didn't give these people proper development. You didn't listen to what their needs and concerns were, and they became disengaged. Whose fault is that? That's on us as the company. That's not on them. You cannot, if you try to run a company that says, we're going to chop the lowest 10% every single year, you end up in the Jack Welch GE world, where literally that company, well, number one, they abandoned 9box in 2011. GE got rid of it. And second,
I just want to make a comment about that, Brian. I actually saw where in a major healthcare system, we had that highly disengaged employee that was with the company for over 30 years. I mean, seriously, over 30 years, highly disengaged, actually perceived as bullying other employees, but nothing was ever done about it throughout that entire experience.
mm-hmm.
So what you're talking about is, it also can lead to legal issues if you don't really address this. I mean, we talk about retention, engagement, and development, but if you don't address these all along, it could be a real problem.
Right, absolutely. And so, this is, but we have a CEO who decided that 9box was the way to go, because of the growth of the company. We really need to know who our high potentials, high performers are. And until we establish enough of a relationship with Dave to be able to say, maybe we don't need, certain things around this anymore. Maybe we could use some different strategies and how to identify this. What we're doing is doing our very best to mitigate any of the potential danger signals. And I think we've, in just 6 weeks, done a pretty good job of already making sure that the entire company is not going to be 9boxed. When we walked in the door, that was the original charter. And so we've been able to do a lot here to make sure that we're focusing people more on how do we develop people that we need to develop, and how do we understand that the development map for different people is different depending on where they sit in the organization. Also, how do we the development strategy for solid performers is primarily engagement and retention, appreciation, showing appreciation for what they do, because we want these people here for 10 years or 20 years. There is nothing wrong with somebody being in a box 5, 6, or 8 for years at a time, because we need those people to operate the company. I've been telling everybody, all the senior leaders so far have laughed at my jokes, so it's good. I'm going to keep using it. I told them, I said, if you think that the 9box is a race to box 1, and that everybody's on the path to try to get to box 1, you're not running a company anymore. You're running the Hunger Games.
Yeah. That's not funny.
Yeah. Trying to get to the cornucopia so they have the bows and arrows so they can shoot everybody else.
Yep.
So my organization is going through this process where, it's not about the number of widgets that we sell. Okay. And we do have what we call we have a particular employee that we call the rainmaker. She makes lots and lots of widgets. I just will say it that way. But at the same time, the behaviors, showing up on time to meetings, being engaged, coaching and mentoring other employees, really contributing, not so much of the priority for that particular employee. And so it's like, we really need to analyze the behaviors, the competencies, the skill sets, the capabilities, and have these deeper dialogues if that person is a real high potential. It's not about the number of widgets that maybe the CFO would say, oh, that's great, they do this amount of numbers. It's not always what we need in this organization as we're transforming to more of an advocacy organization. So this is definitely helpful to have this type of toolkit.
Yep.
And to be able to have these deeper dialogues with the CEO and the executives.
Yeah. And the interactive PDFs that we're creating for both of these drive folks away from the concept of 9-box as some kind of ranking exercise, and much more in terms of, okay, what do I need to do to develop this person based on where they are? And that to us is a much better focus long-term for the health of the company and for the engagement of employees, because as we set up earlier, that's what's most important to the employees is, are you developing me? Are you giving me opportunities to grow within the organization? Or if I'm a steady Eddie and a solid performer and I like where I am, are you giving me an opportunity to simply burnish my skills and burnish my knowledge and tell others about how much of an expert I am within the organization? Because that's what engages those folks. It engages them differently than the folks who are like scrambling for the next available seat that might open up promotion. We've had all sorts of discussions. I have literally walked out on the limb and said, I seriously doubt that Dave, our CEO, is a box 1 right now. The reason is because he can't possibly be at highest possible potential. There's no next seat for him. He's made it. He's the CEO. There is no super CEO position for him to jump to. There is nothing else available. He's probably a box 3. He is probably, and I don't have it directly in front of me because I haven't memorized all these yet. And
you've had this conversation with your CEO? You've actually told him that?
I have not yet. I have told others in the organization that I believe that he's probably a box 3 because it's not a ranking exercise. Yeah. It's not by definition that the head of the company is at the top right in a 9-box, because a 9-box is all about development. It's not about performance ranking.
I think that's an excellent point, Brian, is like all of us at all levels of the organization need development. All of us can use a coach. All of us could use, doesn't matter whatever your title is. Even our senior leaders of our country need that type of development and coaching. So I think that's a great point.
Yep.
Brian, I just have a question that's been popping to my mind about what would, if you had not been given this mandate of a pre-baked framework.
Yeah.
What's the alternative way of categorizing, I guess, people so that you know what to do with them?
Yeah, one alternative is performance versus behaviors, because to me, that's the axis that's missing here. You can be really performing extremely well, hitting all the numbers in an organization, and be an absolute jerk to everybody else.
Leaving a trail of dead bodies, right?
Now we've put some language in the bullet points, and we talk about this, living our values and so on and so forth. But in previous versions where I have had to work with a sense of a 9-box, I have been able to transform it more so that the axis of potential goes away. And instead you have 2 axes, performance and behaviors or competencies. And then based on that, and not using a box, situation, but instead more of a scatter plot, putting them up in the scatter plot and color banding for where you think these people are. Then you get into the conference table like is showing on the left side here of the screen, and you sit down, and then you have big, long conversations about overall potential of that person. Is that a person you really want to get ready for the next seat based on where they are? Because if they have high performance, but their behaviors or competencies are being rated low by their boss or by others in the organization, this is where 360s are important, then you may not want to get them prepped for a next seat. You may instead want to have a conversation with them about, hey, you're being a jerk. You're not embodying our values. You're not speaking in a way that respects others, or you're showing lack of integrity or something like that. That to me is a better way to look at developing folks. But we're probably a year or 2 away before we get to that. There's a possibility in our organization that Dave may end up being satisfied with, okay, I understand where everybody is on the 9-box, and now we don't have to worry about that. Although that's kind of short-sighted too, because one of the things we've been telling all the senior leaders is 6 months from now, you may decide that somebody's in a totally different box. Things change. You may not have a next seat for them after all, or they may suddenly show that that they're a box 1, they get promoted, and suddenly they're promoted to the area of their own incompetence, and suddenly they're not making the numbers, they're not behaving correctly, and that's why we called box 7 mismatched, where box 7 still shows high potential, but suddenly they're not performing well. They're not doing particularly well in performance, and there the development plan for them gets much more specific on how do we get them upskilled, how do we make sure that they're meeting particular goals that need to be met for their piece. Much more of an emphasis on performance in that development plan to move them back over where they might be considered again be a high potential or a high performer. But yeah, it's a complex dance.
Right.
Right. There are 2 of us as leadership development advisors who can intercept and talk a lot of our senior leaders off the ledge.
And I love that you're labeling it developmental, you know, the whole process about 9-box matrix. So they see that that's the tool, but it's really about development transformation. Sumit, you have something to ask? We got to land the plane here soon. So do you have some? No? Oh, he's on mute.
How are we on?
Sorry. Just a quick one here, Lisa. An example of what Brian was talking about, I've seen that in action where I've seen people being plotted on 2 axes, one being skill and the other one being will, which is a summation of behavior, values, and a whole lot of other things. And the scatter plot that Brian mentioned, rather than slotting people into boxes. So I think that, I've used it with a couple of my clients here, and I think it found more acceptance, especially among the incumbents, than a 9-block. So when it was communicated to people, when they were told where they were, it was easier for them to relate to without getting into the comparative ranking part of it.
Right.
Interesting. And Brian, you're done with your slides at this point?
I figured I would just go to questions at this point because
yeah. I mean, I think we've been having the dialogue that really represents what's happening in the chat pretty well, but the question really has become, how do you create, for me, I would summarize it as a culture in which you're not having the Hunger Games, right? That you do create a high trust foundation within the organization in which performance is the key focus, but that an understanding that not everybody's going to perform at the same level at the same time. And accounting for that values piece is huge. And that's the way that I've taught companies around succession planning, is not to have that potential box, but to relabel it with the values and behaviors, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a much better way if you're able to intercept this from scratch. That's what I would have recommended. And I would have not put people in boxes. I would have scattered, as Sumit mentioned. And that way you get more of a sense of, there's a cluster of folks in this little area here, and we can create a cohort out of that cluster. We can create specific development plans for them moving forward, for instance, a mentoring kind of situation. For better or worse, McKinsey is both famous and infamous for originally creating the whole 9-box structure. But I think if you go back to them, they'll tell you the same thing, that the original intent of the 9-box was simply to see where's your talent in the organization. And then based on where your talent is, what kinds of development planning can we do for the different groups? To me, it's become bastardized into everybody has to be at the top right or else you're a failure. Mm-hmm. And that is, we're constantly now in our one-on-ones making sure we're educating people. There's an entire page in the interactive PDF for the senior leaders on the 9-box toolkit. It says what 9-box is not, so that we reiterate to them, it is not a linear ranking. It's not a race to box 1. It's not a way for you to get away from our classic performance management, which is the annual appraisal process and goal setting and those kinds of things. It is not a mechanism by which you're using it just to figure out who to fire. And they've responded extremely well. So far, of the 24 or so, maybe 36 folks that have been placed in the 9-box so far, no one has been placed in the left-hand column. Not a one. Not a one of our folks has been placed in left-hand. So they're all saying, look, our people are either meeting our expectations and occasionally exceeding them, and they're doing their job very solidly, or they're exceeding expectations. They're innovative, they're creative, they're really, top of their game, their best practice, their role model, those kinds of things, which is either center column or right column, which means that for all intents and purposes in our building right now, it's a 6-box. It's not a 9-box. Based on that, and we're over proportioned in the high potential high performer area right now, which I'm not worried about so much. We've got more like 35-40% of our people being placed in boxes 1, 2, and 3 right now. And I'm not so worried about that because the company itself is in such a high growth mode right now. It's harder when you have a business that's mature and has pretty much built out what it needs to build out. And if anything, the company in general is trying to reduce headcount instead of increase headcount. That's not happening in our company right now. Our company literally is, oh my gosh, how do we have to identify and understand who these folks are and give them a pathway so that they can slide into that next seat when it pops up in 6 to 18 months and is ready to go.
Well, that's fantastic, Brian. So if any of our participants want to meet with you for 15 minutes or so, they can reach out to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's my email address sitting there. Feel free to contact me if there's anything I can do to assist.
So great. And also just everyone that's on, just know we have free gifts to all of our attendees, as you see here. You can also just check the box. We were talking about free assessments with 1-year portal access. Awesome deal. The thing I was talking about earlier in our discussion, or you can have a consultation with any one of us today, and including Brian. And Brian, I'm sure you'll give a little more than 15 minutes, but so yes, I mean, feel free to do that. We're about to wrap up here with our session today. So thank you. So thank you, Brian. I really appreciate everything you're talking about. I am a firm believer that we need to transform the whole 9-box mindset.
Absolutely.
And I love I'm going to definitely take that tool and go back and listen to your presentation and utilize it, because I think it's so needed. So thank you so much today. And I also want to thank you, Brian. You've been such an active participant with us for many months now. So thank you so much.
Happy.
Thanks, yeah, so I just wanted to mention as we close here, next week we're going to talk about rewarding employees and how we can use real-time feedback and translate that into recognition and rewards. So a real sensitive topic as far as how to do that. It's been a lot of companies been struggling with how to adapt real-time feedback, and should it or should it not be assigned to tangible rewards at that point. So great discussion that we'll have, and I know Dave Needham has a lot of experience here, so looking forward to hearing his perspective. And thanks, Dave, for your great thoughts on the chat today. A lot of really interesting conversation through there, and I think that this type of interaction is what's going to make us all better professionals and to help our companies and our clients to a greater degree. So thank you for all involved.
Yes, and thank you. It's a time to really focus on our people. Take care of your people. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your health and safety and well-being. A lot of us are going through a lot of challenges right now. We need these sessions to really focus on the positive and well-being of our people. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to wrap up now. Take care. We're going to see you guys next week, Wednesday, Mountain Time, 10 a.m. So please join us again, and then share us on your social medias. So thank you all. We appreciate everyone. Take care.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Bye.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Brian. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.